Hi, this is Dana, and on this channel I speak about spiritual warfare. I have another channel on which I speak about astrology, and welcome to all those who watch my channel for the first time right now. I usually am guided, of course, as usual, I'm guided by God what to speak on. And many times, God also points out specific issues or examples that He wants me to give. I usually make my own list of topics to approach according to the knowledge I gained through my spiritual fighting and spiritual work in general. But most of the times, God is messing up my plans and He changes the topic the last minute. Today, again, God changed the topic and God asks me to talk about toxic relations. This took me a little bit by surprise. I'm not quite sure exactly why. And this is a very broad topic, obviously, to approach. I'm not quite sure that I am the appropriate person to talk about toxic relations, um, simply because I don't engage in toxic relations. And to be more specific, I also don't allow toxicity in my life. So if I detect toxicity created on purpose, usually I either cut off that individual or I shift and change the situation in such a way so I don't have to encounter that individual. Um, Simply because I don't allow toxicity in my life. It's not something personal. It's just that, of course, if a situation it's not on purpose created, that's a different story. I would engage and rectify the situation. But if I detect that that individual is doing it on purpose, to creating toxicity on purpose, I will not engage with that individual. I will cut him off or simply switch the situation in such a way so I don't have to cross paths with that individual anymore. Um, because I believe that toxicity is something that usually comes from within. There's very seldom that toxicity is built up unintentionally. And usually, when it's unintentionally, after one or two discussions, then you can fix it. But most of the times, it comes from within, and that's a extremely broad topic of how toxicity can come from within. I will say this: it's always due to some sort of darkness attachment, some sort of trauma, some sort of addiction, all of these mean some sort of darkness attachment entity which exists in your life. And there are people who are not willing to work on themselves to cut that off. There are people who actually become addicted into a toxicity, literally, or the darkness within their life takes so much power that they've been living in that toxicity for too long and they're not willing to make the effort to cut it off. I've seen people who actually know they are in a toxic relation or in a toxic situation, or that they have a toxic way of doing things, and they refuse to cut it off, refuse to deal with it, refuse to heal it, refuse to change. So then this, as I said, it's a very, very broad topic, and there are many, many ways in which this comes into being or is being maintained. It's personal, it's a personal choice, and this is precisely why I cut people off or change the situation so I don't have to encounter them, because I know it's a personal choice. So if you made the personal choice to stay in toxicity, then of course I don't want you in my presence, in my life, in my environment, simply because I shouldn't be putting up with the toxicity which you're not willing to cut off, right? Anyhow, um, God has guided me. Probably this is why God is guiding me to talk about this, simply because I am very adamant in dealing with toxicity. I've been so all my life. And maybe there are some people who don't know how to deal with it or something like that. And maybe God thinks that people can understand something on how to do this. That's for those who want to do it, because most people don't want to deal with their own toxicity. That's the problem. Again, um, how you deal with these, I don't believe that necessarily I am the perfect example. I think God will decide who would benefit from my example. Probably there are people who might benefit from my example. Each and every choice you make in dealing with toxicity has an upside and a downside. There's always a downside to every choice you make. Um, and usually you have to choose the lesser evil. God told me specifically to use these words, the lesser evil, for that particular time in your life, right? Like, for example, for me, the lesser evil that I would always choose throughout my life has been cutting people off. So I know people will get upset, but it's a lesser evil for me than to stay in their toxicity, than for if I would stay in their toxicity. That harms me more, hurts me energetically, literally more. So I cannot be staying in a harmful environment if that harms me physically, energetically speaking. So then I will cut you off if you create that. And it's not a revenge, it's not a hateful or I don't know, toxic way, or it's not something personal, meaning I'm not doing it to harm the other one. I'm doing it because I know what's good for me. And if you create toxicity, then I don't see the purpose. Why would I stay in that toxicity? Um, and since I sense that you're not willing to deal with it, then why would I even accept it in my life? It's your choice to perpetuate and maintain toxicity. Stay in it then. And God has guided me to, I don't know, maybe talk about this is the downside of this choice. Is that usually people gang up. First of all, they hate you. They hate your guts for it. I learned that throughout my life, that I learned that people that I cut off, although I was not doing it impolitely. So I do not insult people when I cut them off. I do not hold grudges against them. I just simply find a graceful way to get out of the situation, of the relation, of the whatever, and not deal with them anymore, avoid them. I was lucky enough that my previous workplace was in such a way that you would uh, change locations, change departments and teams in which you work very, I wouldn't say very often, but pretty often. So I would always have the opportunity, if an environment would become too toxic for me, I would always have the opportunity to either go on a scholarship or on assignment abroad, or just move to another department or stuff like this, right? So that helped my way of seeing life as well. But I learned with I don't know, with surprise throughout lifetime, that some of the people that I intentionally cut off. So sometimes I would just go on an assignment abroad so I won't have to deal with a specific boss, for example. Or I would just change departments so I won't have to deal with a colleague or something like this. If that colleague was in my office and it was clear to me that that toxicity could not go away. Anyhow, so uh, I learned with surprise throughout lifetime that there are people who actually start hating you for this. They start gossiping about you, they slander your name, they try to convince others to gossip about you, and each individual has his own or her own way of dealing with this, but some of them become really obsessed and really evil. And I learned there are people actually who followed me like 17 years, although we never worked in the same workplace, in the same department, I mean. And they followed me everywhere 17 years, I discovered. And they would call abroad where I was assigned, and they would talk to my colleagues to convince them to do something against me. That's to me, it's evil and sick-minded. And I usually look at these people as like, okay, you must be very unhappy because that much toxicity. I mean, I'm far away from the country even, And now you find time to call my new colleagues who never met me, now are just getting acquainted with me. You call them and you convince them to do something against me. um, that is really evil. I mean, you don't have a life, you don't have a family, you don't have something to do with you, with yourself. I don't know. That shows to me basically that you're very unhappy with yourself. Okay. So you basically encounter this kind of outcomes sometimes where people become obsessed with you because they have a darkness entity. Do you see? Let me explain it from energetic perspective. They have a darkness entity which creates toxicity through them. Now, if you leave and you don't engage with that individual, um, that entity will torture that individual, you know, because it's the type of energy that that entity was supposed to get from you through him doing harm on you. Okay. Now the entity has nobody to get it from since you left, and it concentrates on the host body. So is God actually has shown me this happening. When you succeed to cut off or to break a contract or something like this, the darkness starts feeding from the one who has created it or sent it upon you, right? So that individual becomes, this is why they become obsessed. Now I know from an energetic perspective. Throughout my life I didn't know so much uh, uh, about energy perspective. I would only act, instinctively. But now I know, I know to explain it from a different perspective. um, so it's an energy thing, right? So I always looked at them, as being very unhappy people, because I'm like, you cannot be happy if you do this. I mean, if you, after so many years, you still follow me, you still are working to convince other people to harm me only because I left from your environment and you're not able to harm me yourself anymore. This is crazy, right? But as I said, God has shown me specifically to use these words, the lesser evil. You choose the lesser evil for yourself in that particular moment when you make the choice. So for me, the lesser evil um, was cutting that individual off, regardless the price that I would pay for that, but staying in my own energy, in positive energy, right? For me, that was more important. Engaging with that individual was so energetically painful to me that I just couldn't stand it. So I was like, it doesn't matter. He's gonna hate you. I don't care. I just want to be, I want to cut this off. I don't want to be under this darkness influence. It just harms me. Um, but of course, there, as I said, uh, downsides to it, and you must understand what is the lesser evil for you in that particular time of your ascension. Now, much later on, God has shown me what were the consequences, how some people hated me and created a lot of harm against me, full smearing and slandering campaigns, stealing my stuff. I cannot explain to you, ganging up others against me. It became a whole purpose for some individuals to harm me. And then you have to deal with that, which becomes a totally different spiritual fighting and self-healing type energy type of focus. So you deal with the consequences of the choices you made. You chose to cut off people who then turned against you to harm you. Then you have to deal with that. Of course, the other option is that you choose to stay in toxicity. And then again, you will have to deal with the consequences, namely that you have also to heal but much deeper wounds since you stay in their toxicity. um, and you have to find a way to cut off those individuals and move on and ascend or whatever. So in each, I believe that each choice you make has consequences that you have to deal with later on. But you have to know about yourself first of all and understand what is the lesser evil for you, and define your style, how you deal with toxicity first of all. Even at this point in ascension, you should do it consciously. Personally, I have done it unconsciously, without being conscious about it, throughout my life. But at this point in ascension, you should be able to do it consciously and decide what's the lesser evil, what are the consequences to deal with each, and how you do this. I will give you another example which God had asked me to give. Like, for example, my parents told me that when I was um, around like 5 years old or 4 years old, something like this, we were playing, children were playing, right? And I would always be the teacher. We would play teacher and student, and my parents said, my father said, you would always be the teacher, and everybody else was supposed to be the student. And sometimes some of the children would say, you know what, I know I want to be the teacher now. you know or would just contest me, you're not the teacher, I am the teacher, or something like this. And my father told me, we were watching you, very curious, all parents or were watching you to see what you guys are doing. And every time you would just simply say, it's not possible, I am the teacher. And if you want to teach something, move over there, create your own school, and teach yourself whatever you want to teach. But here, I'm the teacher. And I asked my father, it was funny to me to learn this, and because my father said, we were very surprised always by how determined you are, that you have something to teach, that you have your own path, and how you came up with solutions, entrepreneurial solutions, like you can create your own school, I can create my school, I teach about this, you teach about that, you do this. And I asked my father and said, what did the other children say? And my father said, well, this is why all parents were watching, because we wanted to see what's happening. But we were always amazed how actually none of them went to build another school ever. They always would continue to stay your students. But of course, some of them hated my guts. So what I meant to say is that there are individuals, usually your style of this dealing with toxicity, it is defined from early age, and this is related to many things in regarding who you are, regarding your energy, um, and sometimes it's simply just physical. It's based on how much energy your body can accept. So how much darkness your energy body can accept. If your energy body cannot accept toxicity at all, you will instinctively know, even at a very early age, to cut it off. Okay? You will not engage in fights, you will not accept fights, you will find ways. If you're supposed to be the teacher, like I was imagining at that age, um, you will find ways to follow that through, right? Of course, this depends on how your life shapes up, how your parents behave, how your teachers behave, how your friends behave towards you. There are many things which can interfere on the course of your life and can change that. But this is important for somebody, I imagine, if God insisted on me giving this example from a very, very early age. I'm not a person very experienced with toxicity. This is what I want to point out, is that I never engaged so much with toxicity. But maybe, although I'm not first-hand experienced with toxicity, this is why I could throughout my life be a very detached observer of toxicity and consequences and behavior of toxic people from a distance. And also I was much more able, energetically speaking, to um, cleanse toxicity sent to me by other people, right? Because I would not accept it in my energy body, right? Okay, so again, lesser evil, choosing the lesser evil, this was something that God has pointed out. And of course, dealing, first making the choice and then dealing with the consequences. I think this goes for everyone, regardless what choice you make. Um, if you choose to cut off, you have to deal with that. If you choose to stay in that, you have to deal with that also. So each has consequences, each choices you make. But it's important to understand consciously at this point in ascension, what is your style of dealing with toxicity? Are you tolerant towards toxicity? And if so, why? And what are the consequences on you? Do you know how to deal with the consequences on you? Do you know how to heal the type of toxicity you're allowing in your life? If not, you must know that toxicity will invade your energy gradually, so much that at some point your energy awareness will be, I want to say diminished, but it can become, and I can say this honestly, it can be nullified. So you can be completely unaware energetically of what is going on if you keep allowing toxicity in your life. So there is a very high cost to pay for those who actually accept to stay in toxicity, or allow toxicity into their lives. It's very important. You have, because it literally it invades your energy. It invades your energy, and if you allow it, then after a certain point, your energy awareness will be nullified. I personally don't. I don't allow toxicity, and I gave you the example from a very early age. I can give you other examples as well, which God has been pointing out. I sometimes it doesn't make sense to me immediately what God wants me to, the message that He wants me to convey, because He keeps pointing different examples from my life that He wants me to talk about. I'll give you the example of my father. For example, he has a very toxic way sometimes to deal with things. But I know where his toxicity comes from. He's been a military, so he's used to be very authoritative, and everything should be very, I don't know how to say this in English, like very precise, very to the point, much discipline, focus, much focus. Don't waste his time. Like when I was a child, I remember that my father used to say, what happened today? Because I would make a report every day what happened, and he was like, you have 2 minutes. You're not ready. Go to your room, review what happened, come to me when you're able to speak in 2 minutes. Don't just blab hours and hours, because I don't have time for that. But the toxicity that I want to talk about is that, so this was his style, very precise, very disciplined, very and the toxicity that I want to refer to is like when I would want to start something, he would like, no, 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 this is not good, no, I don't agree with that. It's like, because it was not planned by him. So I learned that, and after a certain age, I decided, when I start something, I wouldn't tell him. I would just tell him at the point when he cannot, when I feel like my project is already grounded enough that he cannot mess it up for me. Because it messes it up if you tell me 24 hours a day, you can do this, you can do this, you can leave me alone. So, for example, I changed apartments, houses, I sold apartments and bought other apartments or other houses and so on. Most of the times I didn't tell him. Most of the times, I think only once I told him ahead of time, but most of the times I didn't tell him, because he would always keep nagging me every day. You cannot do this now, you cannot do this. And I wasn't living with him in the same house. He would call me to tell me, I don't think you should sell this apartment, just go away, I told you I want to sell it. So I would tell him many times. I would tell him after I sold the apartment, I bought the new one, and I already moved into the new one. I would call him and I would say, don't get upset with me. I sold that apartment. I bought a new one. I moved everything. Please come over for coffee. And he would get mad at me. But because he's my father, this is my adoptive family. But because he's my father, it impacts a lot, what he says. So by calling me every day and telling me this, he will just drain my energy, divert my focus. I wouldn't be able to deal with the things that I had to deal, right? So I didn't do it out of hate or anything, as I was saying earlier. I just did it because I decided I want to move to a new apartment, and I don't need your toxicity while I'm doing it, because there's a lot I have to handle. I have to receive people in the house in order to sell this one. I have to go visit other apartments to decide which one to buy. I have to go buy furniture. I have to do many, many, many things. And I don't need you to be nagging me and draw me back, right? Okay, so that's another example. And I guess God wanted me to give you these examples because they're less controversial. These are people. My father, of course, I love him. He's my father. He's my adoptive father, but he raised me. And of course, I love him. So I didn't do it with evil intentions. I just did it because his toxicity was just harming me, basically. He was just annoying me. Okay. Now, maybe this is an example for some people. Maybe some people need to learn how to do this, And I actually had discussions with my father because he would become very frustrated sometimes. And he would say, "You didn't tell me about this." And I said, "Yes, because every time when I move, every time you keep telling me, no, 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 this is a bad idea. This is such a bad idea. You shouldn't do this. I don't allow you to do this. I don't, it's so much conflict. It's so much conflict. You create so much conflict. And each and every single time after 6 months, you've come to me and you say, you know what? You made the perfect decision. And this is why I don't tell you, because it's annoying to me and you're draining me from energy. I have things to do. I don't have time for you to keep calling me every day and tell me not to do it. And I know this is a good decision. So then, plus, I'm an adult. So leave me alone to make my own decision. Is my own house I'm selling, is my own house I'm buying. Just let it be. um, Maybe this is some example for somebody that needs to hear. Maybe somebody needs to learn how to do this. Sometimes even people that are very dear to us, that are very, like my father, for example, they can be very toxic. And this again comes from a certain type of toxicity. And I know it comes from sort of his lifestyle as a military. I know it also comes from the way he was brought up. Also, his father was very authoritative, and he had certain ways in which he thought he has been raised and educated, that relations between children and parents should develop, and so on. So I know the sources of his toxicity. I cannot change those, right? I know the degree of his toxicity, and I know how much it harms me. So basically, there's no way around it. When I want to do something important, um, I know that he's gonna drain me and stop me and block me, and I just simply know that is the best way to deal with it is not to tell him. Not to tell him, so he will not be nagging me, so he won't be drawing me back, basically depleting me from energy, because we encounter fights, at some point this becomes a fight. So then maybe some people need to hear this. Maybe some people have the same problem. It's also a generational difference. I'm pretty sure that there are many individuals who deal with similar situations with their parents. It doesn't mean you don't love your parents if you just cut them off certain situations of your life when you have to achieve certain things and they are creating a blockage. You must do it with empathy and with a full understanding of the lesser evil in the situation. I must accomplish this. That parent or individual is not good for me while I do this. I need to cut him off. That's it, you know. So maybe some people need to hear this. Otherwise, I've seen other people, you do not achieve that. You simply just don't achieve that. Or you achieve it, but you're already exhausted and drained by energy when you do it. I never hidden something from my parents for good. I always tell my father that I moved at some point, but I tell him when I decide that I can deal with his reaction and his reaction will not influence the outcome. Okay, that's the point, I think. Somebody needs to hear that, I imagine, because God was very adamant on me talking about this. Now we already have 29 minutes. I don't know. I mean, God has been talking, has asked me to be talking about toxic relations in a couple as well, but this becomes complicated, as this is a very very broad topic. So I don't know what to say about this too, because I don't have much experience. I didn't usually, I never actually allow toxicity in my any of my relations, let alone in a couple relation. I really don't see the point of having a couple relation with somebody who's toxic. uh, Clearly that must be healed. um, so uh, uh, oh, that's a very broad topic, and I don't know how to sum it up in a few words. I will give you one example. I mean, I I married when I was 20 years old with the individual with whom I've been in a relationship since I was like 16, 17 years old. So that was the only relation I had as a teenager and young woman. We were in a long-term relation for years. Then we got married, 13 years marriage. It ended up very badly. He stolen a house from me. He stolen many other things from the house from me. And he's done very, very bad things towards the end of that marriage. So it really, in the end, became very toxic. But I truly met, I tried to get out of that as gracefully as possible. I tried to get out of that marriage as gracefully as possible. And I tried to be very, very cautious with the next couple relation that I would develop, because I was very shocked about what he was capable, that individual was capable of doing just before the divorce. Um, and I never imagined that somebody would steal my property, and many other things, um, and especially not somebody whom with whom you shared your life, all your life basically, and whom you helped to become who he was at the time, whatever. So I encountered 10 years later, actually. I think that is the example I can give of a full toxic relation, created on purpose toxic, right? So I met an individual. I was not interested necessarily in a relation or in a marriage, since I was married so early on and for such a long time, as opposed to most of women my age around me, which were desperate to get married. I was like, hell no. I had enough of that. And the outcome of it was son of a bitch, ungrateful son of a bitch.